Enterprise. From Politics PA, I'm Steve Ulrich, and this is Voices of Reason. Tuesday, May 19th is primary election day in the Commonwealth. As you prepare to cast your ballot for your candidate of choice, we thought we'd focus on the Republican and Democratic policies that could affect each race and how they could impact your decision. Today, I'll talk with Emily Brey, State Director with Americans for Prosperity, Pennsylvania, and Colin Seeberger, Senior Advisor with the Center for American Progress. That's coming up next on Voices of Reason. Now on Voices of Reason, I'm pleased to be joined by Emily Brey. Emily is the State Director for Pennsylvania for Americans for Prosperity. Emily, thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
Steve, it's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, AFP's stated mission is to reignite the American dream. What does that look like in practice in 2026?
Well, Steve, let me tell you. So, Americans for Prosperity, if you're tuning in, this is the first time you've heard of us. We are the Commonwealth's largest grassroots organization. And there's so many interest groups in Harrisburg right now, lobbyists for every interest group you can imagine. But there's not a lot of lobbyists under the dome working for taxpayers. And so that's where Americans for Prosperity comes in. We're working every day to fight for the hardworking taxpayer, make sure we're at those tables when policies that are impacting our daily life are being discussed. And we're selling folks on this crazy radical idea that you can spend your money better than Harrisburg or Washington can.
That certainly sounds that way. So that's what reigniting the American dream is all about?
Reigniting the American dream is about ensuring that our founding fathers, there's this radical experiment that was the United States of America, those ideas are still top of mind today. And so we've launched what we call the One Small Step campaign. This is a nod to America's 250th birthday that we're celebrating this year. Of course, Pennsylvania, right, in Independence Hall holds a special place in that celebration. But this is about, celebrating our founding fathers who had this crazy idea of this grand experiment that is our country. And they took those brave first steps to make that happen. And so when we talk about reigniting the American dream, we're encouraging our activist base to take their first small step, because our country's history, it's messy, it's miraculous, but most importantly, it's unfinished. And so we're encouraging our activists to take their step, because who knows what they can accomplish.
Well, you mentioned that right at the outset. There aren't that many lobbyists, working, and you've certainly built up a grassroots campaign. And it sounds like it's all coming together here for the 250th.
We have. So we have tens of thousands of grassroots activists every single day who are working towards a freer and more prosperous Pennsylvania. So I'm a lifelong Pennsylvanian myself. I believe in just what it means to be a Pennsylvanian, and freedom and opportunity really should be at the heart of that. But we're seeing time and time again, folks are just leaving for greener pastures. I think about the people that I went to college with, hail to Pitt. I'm a Pitt graduate. But most of my friends most of my friends have left for greener pastures, more opportunity. And so what we work towards at Americans for Prosperity is creating a better climate for economic opportunity, whether that be removing burdensome regulations to businesses, entrepreneurs, small businesses, or better budgeting, which we certainly know is direly needed in Harrisburg. Those are the issues that are at the heart of our taxpayer activists, and they're working every day to see that through in under the dome.
We've seen a lot of young people graduate from college here in Pennsylvania and then leave the Commonwealth. You make a good point there. What kind of things do you think we should be doing, specifically, I guess, to keep more young people in the state? We don't want to continue to lose congressional seats in the U.S. House.
You're exactly right. And we're seeing that time and time again. Every time the census rolls around, we're losing our population. And so there's a few policy ideas that our taxpayer activists are pushing under the dome. Two of those being more affordable housing and unleashing our energy abundance. Those are the two key issues that we're hearing time and time again, especially as we're canvassing doors across Pennsylvania. Folks are saying it's really hard to afford everyday life because gas prices are what they are and they continue to skyrocket. Housing, especially for first-time home buyers, is just really unattainable right now. Those are the top two goals that we're working towards at Americans for Prosperity. And we have a policy of solutions that we call the Keystone Playbook. You can find those at afppennsylvania.com. But we're going to be continuously talking to folks about these, or members under the dome about these ideas, because they do see bipartisan support.
You mentioned the Keystone Playbook. I wanted to ask you about that. I read that in your op-ed this morning. Could you explain a little bit more about what that entails?
Absolutely. So, the Keystone Playbook is our agenda for creating that freer and more prosperous Pennsylvania. Of course, it includes housing reforms that, again, like I said, enjoy bipartisan support, like legalizing accessory dwelling units, allowing for duplexes, triplexes, basically getting government out of the way, getting some of these burdensome zoning laws out of the way so we can build. And it really does just come down to simple supply and demand. When there's more supply, clearly the demand hasn't changed. We want people to, continue to invest in Pennsylvania, raise their families here. And when we have the supply to support the demand, prices are going to be more attainable for first-time home buyers. So by, ensuring that some of these crazy zoning laws that are holding us back from building are no longer at play, we can increase that supply. And then on the energy side of things, I mean, we know in Pennsylvania, unfortunately, we have the third highest gas tax in the nation. And that is just something that is certainly not helping us. However, we also have so many natural resources under our feet here. And so we, on a national and a federal level, are talking about permitting reform. There's so many energy products or projects right now that are just in energy purgatory right now. We have the resources to do it, but we just can't build. So by removing some of those barriers to opportunity, we can, again, it comes back to supply and demand economics. When there's the supply there, when we can unleash that energy abundance, folks are going to see their prices go down. Ratepayers are going to see much more affordable energy bills.
When you talk about unleashing energy, you also talk about the sudden impact that AI data centers are going to have throughout the Commonwealth. And you hear different stories. You hear some people say it's going to create a lot of jobs as the contractors build the data center. Then you also hear the critics say there's not going to be many jobs for people once the data center is built. AFP have any stance on AI data centers?
We certainly support data centers. What we've seen in states like Virginia, these are job creators. They bring jobs wherever they go. We need the energy to be able to support it. So that necessary permitting reform is a great first step. And I know that there's been a lot of efforts, both on a state and federal level, again, enjoying that bipartisan support to remove some of those barriers that can allow us to fuel these data centers. Our own Senator Dave McCormick has really led the charge under the dome in Washington on meaningful permitting reform. We're so grateful. He just introduced a bill, which is just, again, going to streamline these projects so we can increase supply, unleash that abundance, and again, get these gas prices down, because that's what we're hearing time and time again from folks at the doors. They just want to see gas prices that aren't making them make these critical trade-offs when it comes to, like, putting food on their table or putting gas in their car.
One of the challenges that I think any political candidate, any incumbent has is trying to figure out how to get the message across to their constituents when they face an election. Certainly, as you just mentioned, the economy is going to be at the forefront when it comes to, let's start with the congressional races in Pennsylvania. And certainly the Commonwealth looks to be a tipping point for who's going to end up in majority control of the U.S. House. Where's Americans for Prosperity? Where are they working in terms of those key districts? Let's say 1, 7, 8, and 10.
So at Americans for Prosperity, right now, we are just celebrating the House GOP conference's work on ensuring that we saw the working families tax cut come to fruition last year, signed by the president on July 4th. What a fitting time to sign this legislation into law. Right now, we are thanking key members of Congress who really, fought the good fight there. So we have our activists on the ground right now in Congressman Scott Perry's district, thanking him for his work on, seeing the working families tax cut through. That was really a tremendous win for the House GOP conference and for the Senate as well. I mean, it was just such a great win. I mean, we were facing the largest tax increase in American history, which is just a really scary thought. If that had, had we not gotten this done last year. But because of Congressman Scott Perry's work, we're able to, enjoy up to $2,400 and keep that in our pockets instead of sending it to Washington. So that's a huge win.
What do you think about the impact that AFP could have on some of the other races? Certainly, why don't we look at Bucks County and Brian,
Mhm.
who's been able to win convincingly in what is growing more and more to be a purple district?
We have our activists on the ground right now that are just talking about those kitchen table issues. I mean, we're just canvassing, talking about the issues, just trying to understand what folks care about and truly what's, top of mind. We had a recent survey come out last year, I'm sorry, just a couple of months ago, just about cost of living, right? And 40% of Americans cite that 40% of Americans cite like rising costs of living as their number one reason for voting in the midterms. And so for these vulnerable congressional districts, as you mentioned, I mean, if you're not talking about the cost of living, you need to start. That is the most important topic on Pennsylvanians' minds.
From a statewide level, as Governor Shapiro looks to be taking on Stacey Garrity in the fall, and we look ahead to the month of June, which is state budget time throughout the state. What kind of work is your organization doing to try to get across some legislative policies in Harrisburg?
Certainly, we are watching budget season like hawks. I mean, our taxpayer activists, this is the bread and butter of why they get involved with Americans for
It's
Prosperity.
their Super Bowl, right?
Exactly. And I can tell you, Steve, they are not thrilled with the governor's proposal. This is money that we just can't spend. I mean, our activists have to live within their means. I have to live within my means. We all do. Why does Harrisburg get a pass? Why do we continue to spend more? And to your point earlier, we are continuing to see people leave the Commonwealth for greener pastures. So who's going to take on that tax burden? It's you and I. So we're going to be talking about better budgeting policies. Again, you can check out the Keystone Playbook, where we have a whole host of policies that Harrisburg could implement tomorrow if they wanted to. That would put like caps on spending based upon inflation, population growth. That way we can continue to live within our means. And, the poor taxpayers across our Commonwealth aren't really taking on that burden.
Is there a common ground between Republicans and Democrats, do you think, when it comes to something like recreational cannabis, which the governor promises will bring in billions of revenue that's
Mm.
being lost to our neighboring states, while Senate Republicans are like, that's not true whatsoever. Is there a common ground here?
Goodness, it really does seem like Harrisburg's very divided, right? It seems like time and time again, especially during budget season coming up next month, it just seems like both parties are, fighting. That's the common theme. But, what we've seen is that there's good, sound policies that enjoy bipartisan support, like some of these housing reforms, where we can certainly see this through. I mean, the governor has signaled that he wants to see some of these housing policies signed into law. And it's just really up to both parties in both chambers to come together, address the fact that, affordability and cost of living is the number one issue plaguing our constituents here. And, by making housing more available, by increasing that supply, this is good free market policy that really can, enjoy support from both parties. We can see this happen. And I'm cautiously optimistic, Steve, that we're going to see bipartisan housing by year's end.
Is that the kind of policy you think, Emily, that engages younger generations who have a different view of the role of government? There's like, how can you help me get started to follow the American dream that my parents, my grandparents followed? Right now, it just seems to be out of reach.
It certainly is. It's that, when we think about the American dream, that white picket fence, that really does feel out of reach for so many of, my friends that are of similar age. I mean, we see the average age of a first-time home buyer increase year after year. And, we're believers here at Americans for Prosperity that those good free market policies, getting government out of the way, who is the government to tell us what we can build on our property and where we can build? That really should be like a common sense issue that rallies both sides of the aisle. But we are seeing that. And certainly our activist base is very excited about the potential. And that, to your point, really does bring out a new coalition of free market housing activists. And again, I'm just very encouraged to see this move through the chambers.
I'll get you out of here on this one. As you look ahead to the midterm elections, what is Americans for Prosperity hoping for in the Commonwealth?
As we look towards the midterms, I'll tell you what, I said this earlier, if you're not talking cost of living, start today. If you're running for office, start talking about those kitchen table issues. These are the issues we see time and time again as we canvass doors. I'll give you an example. I was just talking with one of my engagement directors in the Lehigh Valley. He was canvassing a door with an activist. And the person on the other side of the door said, yeah, I mean, of course I'm voting, but I got to tell you, I am really disappointed to see cost of living continue to be something that's like hurting my family. And this is, we're hearing this from Democrats, Republicans, independents. This is the one issue that there seems to be unanimous agreement we've got to address. And my plea to our policy champions, start talking about those kitchen table issues. Start yesterday.
My thanks to Emily Brey, the Pennsylvania State Director for Americans for Prosperity, for joining me today on Voices of Reason.
Thanks so much.
Now I'm pleased to be joined by Colin Seeberger. Colin is a senior advisor with the Center for American Progress, has a long history in public policy, and also worked for Senator Bob Casey in his press office a few years back. Colin, thanks for joining us today on Voices of Reason.
It's great to chat with you, Steve.
First of all, tell me a little bit about your background. So you did work with Senator Casey, but you've also had a number of other responsibilities for joining the Center for American Progress.
Yeah, so my background is primarily in political campaigns. I started off as a researcher before starting to work in press and communications. I worked in a number of different political campaign cycles before really moving on and doing a lot of issue advocacy work, and have done that work at a handful of different organizations, and most recently at the Center for American Progress, where we're a think and action tank is how we describe ourselves. So we are investigating, the big challenges that people in the United States and across the globe are experiencing, and coming up with real policy solutions to make a difference in their lives, and tackle those challenges.
Well, as we take a look at the upcoming May 19th Pennsylvania primary, certainly we're watching 4 big races in Pennsylvania. On the congressional side, in District 1 with Bob Harvey, the 7th Congressional District in the Lehigh Valley with 4 different candidates. Of course, we're keeping an eye on the 8th Congressional District up in northeastern Pennsylvania, although there's not a primary there, and the 10th with Janelle Stelson going up against Justin Douglas in the Capital District. Right now, it really seems like the headwinds are favoring Democrats when you look ahead to the midterm, but there are also some challenges ahead, aren't there?
Well, I think that's right. I would say I think that one of the things that's a real advantage for Democrats when you look at the 10th district, the 8th district. The Democratic candidates in those places are, putting up stellar fundraising figures. They have very strong name ID in those places. And then you look at, Bob Harvey in the first is going up against a very well-funded incumbent in Brian Fitzpatrick. Bob Brooks is a working class guy. This is not somebody who comes from the halls of, the well-connected in DC and is going to have to, make up some ground on fundraising, but seems like he has really, we'll see what happens with the primary, but seems like he has really consolidated a lot of support, which I think will well position him for the fall. But ultimately, well, a lot of that sounds like, kind of just horse race politics. Ultimately, the fundamentals as we head into the fall is that Donald Trump is averaging about 20 points underwater. Americans are even, more disfavorable to his handling of the economy. He's underwater by 25 points. Americans' consumer sentiment is at a historic all-time low. People are sick and tired of being told by politicians that they're going to tackle the cost of living and yet implement tariffs that have cost Pennsylvanians more than $1,000. They're sick and tired of people who promise that, we're done with the forever wars and then start Middle East wars that are costing them an arm and a leg when they go to fill up their tanks at the gas pump. And that is, I think, ultimately, that's the backdrop that is ultimately going to swing these races, I think, in a particular direction, and that being toward Democrats as we look toward November.
Is this one of those situations where Democratic candidates are going to be able to run against Donald Trump? Are they going to be trying to tie the Republican candidate to Trump? Do you just let the economy and the way people look at their own pocketbook take over in November?
I mean, I think that, Democratic candidates should absolutely be out there, talking about how Donald Trump, while they would work with Donald Trump if he was doing things that was actually improving the lives of Pennsylvanians, that's not what's happening right now. And, when they cannot, support his policies because they're harming Pennsylvanians, well, then, they're going to fight him every step of the way. But right now, people are feeling pain. It is very visceral. 145,000 people who, were counting on having health insurance don't have it in Pennsylvania anymore because Republicans in Pennsylvania's congressional district, Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress all voted to let the premium tax credits expire for the Affordable Care Act. And that means that Pennsylvanians are paying about $600 more for their health insurance premiums. And people are about to see their premiums go up even higher because insurers are about to announce rate increases for 2027. We expect that in Pennsylvania in the next couple of weeks or so. We'll start getting some of those preliminary numbers, but that is a direct consequence of the policies of these Republican members of Congress. And, I think if you look at, even somebody like, Brian Fitzpatrick, likes to brand himself as this moderate, and, he has, voted with the president less than Scott Perry, less than Ryan McKenzie or Rob Bresnahan. But you look at the policies that Brian Fitzpatrick has supported, like protecting the president's tariffs authority. That's a direct tax on people in Bucks County, right? And that is, I think, going to be really hard to justify, not to mention, the fact that Brian Fitzpatrick's just another vote for a Republican majority that's rubber stamping everything that Donald Trump wants. I think that's going to be a hard bill of goods to sell.
What type of policies does the Center for American Progress want to champion when it comes to providing these Democratic candidates with platforms as they move forward?
Yeah, so here at the Center for American Progress, we have been releasing a number of different ideas, mapping out an affirmative agenda that really does two things. And these are all focused on the cost of living. It's focused on providing short-term relief to people to help them right now because they're feeling the pain, while also at the same time making, bold and systemic changes to our systems to be able to grow the supply and bring down costs over the long term. So look at things like housing. Our agenda is really focused on providing relief both to renters and first-time homeowners by creating incentives for localities to build additional supply, making it cheaper for renters and homeowners. And in exchange, the federal government chips in by helping lower rents by about $1,000 a year. It would also lower costs for first-time home buyers. These are really the kinds of investments that we're talking about needing to make. But you also look at, other issues like utilities, like healthcare, groceries. All of these are issues where we need to be providing immediate relief to people while also making kind of longer term structural changes that are going to help consumers in the long run.
Is this something where, as we talk about perhaps suspending the federal gasoline tax, that seems like it's just kind of a drop in the bucket, and it may sound good, but is it really going to have an impact on Pennsylvanians and people across the country?
Well, of course, people are experiencing, pain at the pump, and that is very real. But we also need to look at this thing in context, right? And cutting the federal gas tax, would save about a couple dimes a gallon, is what the estimates I've seen say. And yet, at the same time, Americans are paying more than $1 more for their gas ever since President Trump started this war in Iran, a war of choice, mind you. And so really that's just, it's a drop in the bucket. Like it's not, it's not going to fix the real problem, which is the fact that we went into a war that many people, many experts would say it was very obvious that, creating a bottleneck in the Strait of Hormuz was going to increase prices. We got inflation data out yesterday showing that inflation is the highest it is in 3 years. That was foreseeable. We got new wholesalers price data out this morning. It's called the PPI, which shows that businesses, have seen 6% inflation over the course of the last year. You know what they're going to do with that? They're going to end up passing those costs on to consumers. So, and experts even say, even if you open up the Strait of Hormuz today, oil is not going to, we're not going to see pre-war oil prices before the end of this year. So this is really a scenario where people are feeling squeezed, and they're looking for everything they can get. Yet, some of the ideas that the president has put on the table are really just a drop in the bucket.
So how can policymakers ensure that the economic growth that people in the Trump administration point to is shared rather than heavily weighted toward the 1%?
Well, what they can do is they can stop, taking an axe to the benefits that help people meet their basic needs. 400,000 people in Pennsylvania are at risk of losing some or all of their SNAP benefits because of President Trump's big, beautiful bill. I mentioned the 145,000 who've already had to drop their coverage for healthcare. But really, that's just a small slice of those who are at risk of seeing their coverage get lost or their benefits cut as states have to grapple with some of these federal changes. and really, what we need to be doing is, focusing on not just putting downward pressure on prices, but helping lift wages for working class people. The inflation data that we saw yesterday showed that real wages are actually going down. Inflation is now outpacing wage growth, which means, this isn't kind of a figment of consumers' imagination. Like, they are actually being squeezed, and that means raising wages. It means increasing the minimum wage. Something that Governor Shapiro has been talking a lot about, I know, and is something that Pennsylvanians, will have a chance to, go register their minds about when they vote for a new state legislature this fall. Obviously, Democrats enjoy a very small majority in the House, but they just need to flip 2 seats in the Senate, and Democrats and Governor Shapiro can deliver a wage to many of the folks in the state who work hard, but only earn a meager wage.
I know this is one of the things that the governor talks about, trying to be able to stem the tide of young people leaving the Commonwealth and bringing jobs back to the Keystone State. Is it going to take a trifecta? Is it going to take a change in majority control in the U.S. House to try to, I guess, bring some more economic growth back to not only Pennsylvania, I guess, but to the Northeast?
Well, I think, Governor Shapiro has really shown that he is able to get results, about nearly $1 billion in additional funding for schools, has, made some inroads with, delivering some relief for consumers as the data centers, swarm Pennsylvania, as they are all over the country, by making the data centers, have to pay their fair share in terms of not increasing energy costs for consumers. He's done those things, working with Republicans, whether that is at the state level, whether that is working, with the White House. And, I think, though, that, some of the things that are going to help Pennsylvanians most, like increasing the minimum wage, like making important economic development investments to bring more business back to the Commonwealth, are going to be either hamstrung or made possible by having a Democratic trifecta. And I think, more than anything, I think, the governor really wants to, focus on stopping the attack that we're seeing on our rights, whether it is, attacks on reproductive freedom coming from Republicans at the state and federal level, or attacks on communities and people who have been in this country for decades, or American citizens themselves at the hands of this federal government that is out of control and is, not following the rule of law or defying court orders, seem relentlessly ignorant of the pain that people are experiencing every single day. And I think having a bulwark against that when necessary is going to be, an effective message headed into the fall.
Let me follow up a little bit on the issue of rights. The Supreme Court recently, with this case decision in Louisiana, allowing massive redistricting, if you will, and to, in some people's minds, really limit the Black voice in elections. Say, in Pennsylvania, the Constitution doesn't allow us to redistrict in that way, but still, this is something that I think all Americans need to be, certainly Pennsylvanians need to be paying attention to, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, we are, we are really staring at a whole new paradigm as it relates to voting rights and the Voting Rights Act in this country. We're already seeing, in response to the Calais decision for the Supreme Court, states like Louisiana, states like Alabama, seems to be that South Carolina is headed next. Florida, others are not just gerrymandering; they are explicitly trying to purge, representation of Black and other minority people from elected office, and these are in states where, take Mississippi, where over 40% of the state is Black, right? And yet you're going to have an all-white, 7-0 delegate. I think it's 7-0 delegation in Mississippi. That's outrageous, and I think is exactly why Pennsylvanians need to be following what's happening quite closely. But we also need to be clear that this whole redistricting conversation is all happening because the president and his political advisors understand just how weak his political position is as we head into the midterms. And they're trying to do everything they possibly can to prevent accountability, which will be coming if Democrats win a chamber of Congress as we head into next year. I mean, this is the White House, the guy ran on Drain the Swamp, but he and his, the First Lady and his two sons have amassed more than $2 billion in cash and gifts alone. Whether it is crypto gains, whether it is, government contracts, whether it is documentary deals, the list goes on and on. And, I think that's not going to, be able to happen without, some oversight and accountability coming under a Democratic House majority.
Well, sometimes I've noticed that once a norm is tossed to the side, the floodgates are open. So if you run on Drain the Swamp seems to keep filling up, and more Americans seem to lose faith in the system of government. I mean, what can we do to rebuild the social trust in some of these institutions?
You're exactly right. And I think it's one of the reasons why, in addition to focusing on cost of living, taking on corruption is, I think, another major theme that we're seeing from Democratic candidates across the Commonwealth. Bob Brooks, in particular, has really talked a lot about taking on big money in politics, overturning Citizens United. We at the Center for American Progress, my colleague Tom Moore, conceived and what we're calling the corporate power reset. So states have the ability to dictate the powers of corporations in their business codes, state by state, and courts have also distinguished powers from rights. And we're actually about to see Hawaii, just the Hawaii legislature last week became the first legislature to pass a bill to overturn Citizens United, get big corporate spending out of politics, dark money out of politics. And now the governor in Hawaii could be signing this bill and become the first state in the country to actually get it done. Voters in Montana, this being a coalition of Democrats, Republicans, and independents, have put this question on the ballot in November. Anticipate that it's going to get a lot of support from the people of Montana. And that's exactly the kind of thinking that, Democrats in Pennsylvania, if they get that trifecta, may be able to get done and really show that they can deliver meaningful change that restores power by putting it back in the people's hands and making sure that these kind of big money, industry fueled, super PACs are not able to flood the airwaves with, just lies and distortions to, keep holding on to their own profits.
We've talked a lot about how things seem to be pointing the Democrats' way as you head toward the midterms. Certainly, the party out of power traditionally picks up seats across the board. But a couple of days ago, Justice on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, David Wecht, essentially renounced his party affiliation from leaving the Democratic Party and going to be a full-fledged independent for a lot of rationale, a lot of reasons. But one of them, he's talked about the rise of anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party. Are there other warning signs that Democrats need to be aware of headed into the fall?
Well, I would say anti-Semitism is disgusting, vile. It has no place in our politics, and that is something that I would advise any elected official, Democrat, Republican, to be very clear about. But the same also applies to Islamophobia. I was in Texas last week for a funeral, and the number of ads that I saw from Republican elected officials, describing their opponent as Mecca Mays Middleton, who's a candidate for Attorney General, is just outrageous. And this kind of religious bigotry has no place in our politics. But to your broader question about warning signs for Democrats, I think, I think that they running against Trump is only going to get you so far. You need to spell out clearly, what you're going to do to make a difference in people's lives if you're given power. And it may not be immediate, but these are the things that you're going to fight for. I think that's what people are looking for. I also think that, voters are looking for someone who is going to not be afraid and is going to take the fight to those in power where and when necessary. And I think those are going to be candidates who are able to best connect with the pulse of the electorate in this moment. The pain that people are feeling is really, really pronounced. It's not, I think that there's been economic anxiety in the country for quite some time, but it's palpable right now. And I think people's sense of we'll just twiddle our thumbs and bide our time is, it's going to be less resonant with folks.
My thanks to Colin Seeberger, the Senior Advisor with the Center for American Progress, for joining me today on Voices of Reason. Colin, thank you.
You bet.
My thanks to Emily Brey, Pennsylvania State Director with Americans for Prosperity, and Colin Seeberger, Senior Advisor with the Center for American Progress, for joining us today on Voices of Reason. This episode was produced by Brianne O'Neill. For Pennsylvania political news every weekday morning, sign up for the PoliticsPA Playbook at PoliticsPA.com. That's it for today's episode of Voices of Reason. I'm Steve Ulrich. See you next time. Surprise.